what's up guys? So I just finished making this front mud flap for my 3rd gen 4runner and it turned out pretty nice. I used to go to the car wash, spend like 20 bucks cleaning my truck, and then 5-10 minutes after leaving the car wash, the side of my truck was covered in dirt because I don't have any mud flaps in the front. So here's a bit of a closer look on this one side that I did do. I went for a little test drive. That's why it's really dirty here, but as you can see, the side of the truck is pretty clean. There's a little bit of splatter here at the bottom, but I could live with that. As long as it's not getting all over the doors, it's pretty good. So I think it's doing its job. But yeah, that's what it looks like. I think it turned out pretty nice. But let's go over to the other side and get started on the other one. Also, this is what I'm using to actually make the mud flaps. It's just like a flexible rubber material. I got it from Princess Auto, and I'll leave the link for this in the description below. All right, so looking at the passenger side here, I haven't started here yet. So I have 35-inch tires, by the way. Every time I turn my wheel, it usually liked to catch right here on the fender flare, and it would kind of just pull on this, and over time it would just like pop it out of place. So let's go ahead and get this flare off, and then I'll show you what it looks like behind it. I've done a little bit of cutting and hammering in there in the past. Like when I used to have 33-inch tires, I did a little bit of work in there just to make it clear better, nothing major. Okay, so I just placed the fender flare back in. I haven't actually clipped it or anything. And I've gone ahead and just roughly with my marker, just made a line right here. That's the part of the flare that I'm gonna cut off. Okay, so I got that flare cut and I just kind of put it back in just to see what it looks like. And if you notice this right here, so that's the actual fender. If I put it from this angle, it's a little bit easier to see. The fender sticks slightly past the fender flare. So if I was to put the mud flap as is, right, it would get attached right here on the fender flare, and then it would actually hit the fender, which would give me less clearance, if that makes sense. So I've made a line, just a rough line on the fender. I'm gonna actually cut that off. This will all be flush, so when I put the mud flap, it won't be hitting here. So it'll give me a little bit more clearance there as well. So just gonna get this popped off. And here we go. We can see a little bit better. It's really dirty. And my line is very rough, but I'm just gonna use an angle grinder. Just gonna cut that right off. And then we can put the flare back in. All right guys, so the last thing I'm gonna do here before we go and cut the mud flap, so this right here, this hole, this is from factory, and normally there's a plastic clip that goes in here that was holding this liner in place. But now that we've cut that off, I'm actually gonna utilize this for the mud flap. So I've got one of these threaded rivet things, and I'm just gonna go ahead and put this in here. I'm gonna rivet it in, so it's gonna get squished and it'll be stuck there. And because this is threaded, once it's in there and once the mud flap is in here, I can actually use a bolt to secure it in place, which is really nice. It just kind of works out perfectly. So it'll get attached there as well as on the fender flare. So let me show you how I'm gonna do this, and then we'll get the mud flap cut. Okay, so I got one of these rivet guns here and then my threaded rivet. I'm gonna just go ahead and thread this on just like this. And then all I gotta do here is just put this into the hole and just squish it in place. Okay, and then we can just take this out. And there we go, that's stuck in there. And now we have a threaded hole, so once the mud flap's in, I can put a bolt in there. All right, so time to cut the mud flap. I'm just gonna cut it to the same size as I did on the driver's side, which was 12 inches wide. So a foot wide by 21 3/4 long. So let's go ahead and cut this. I'm just using a roll of tape to cut out the ends to make it round, so just to make it like that, right? It's pretty much a perfect match, so I'm just doing this. Okay, so this is why I cut this, okay? So when I put this in here, this portion of it is actually gonna get tucked behind this liner, like that. Hopefully you can see that clearly in the camera. I'm gonna put the rivets along here, and then I'm gonna also make a hole somewhere here, which will be lined up with this rivet that I had put in. I've got it put in here. Okay, so I just have this. It's just like a little sharp pokey thing that I have. I poked a hole through the mud flap, and it's just going into the right there where the rivet was. So it just helps hold it in place. And then I've gone ahead and made my first hole right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this rivet in there, and then I can put my first screw in, hold the mud flap, and then just put a few more up top here, and yeah. All right, guys, so I got this side all in. So I have 3 right now. I am gonna put 2 more, 1 here and 1 here. But I ran out of rivets, that's why I just left the 3. It's fine for now. And then I have that hole right there. So I'm gonna put a bolt through there. That's gonna go into that rivet that we had put in. And then the only thing left is I'm actually gonna put a little zip tie right here on this side, just because once I put that bolt in, this section is still gonna be kind of hanging down. So I'll show you when we get there. That's what I did on the driver's side, and it worked really good. But let's do this one first, and then we'll get to the bottom and we'll be pretty much done. The last thing is just that bottom corner that I was talking about with the zip tie. I'll show you from the behind because it's easier to see. So if we go right from here, so there's our mud flap, and if you look right here, there's that square hole, and when I bring the mud flap back, you see it lines up pretty much perfectly with that hole right there. So all I'm gonna do is make a little hole on the mud flap right there where it lines up with that hole, and then I'm gonna put a zip tie. Okay, so there's the zip tie. Now, I just chose to do a zip tie just because I figured it would be easier if I ever need to get in here. It's easy enough to just cut the zip tie. I could have done what I did with this upper bolt here, just put a threaded rivet and then put a bolt. But I just thought if I ever want to take that bolt out, it's going to be kind of hard to get in here with a screwdriver. So that's the only reason why I did this, but you could totally put a rivet in there as well, and I'm sure that would work just fine. Okay, that's it. Okay, so the mud flap is in, it's all done. Now, I decided to do one last thing. I don't really like how close the mud flap is to the tire here. I mean, it's fine as is. I actually test drove it, it's not a problem. But it would be nice if the mud flap was kind of like that. So I went out and got some bling bling right here, some brass chain. And I'll show you in a second where I have it attached over there, but I'm gonna get this bolted onto the back of the mud flap like this. and then it'll hold the mud flap out completely out of the way of the tire. And then there will be no risk of the mud flap like catching onto the tire and, you know, rolling onto itself. So yeah, let me show you what I did here, and then we'll get it attached and we'll be all done. Okay, so in the back here, this isn't my best work, but there was a hole right there. I'm not sure what exactly that was for, but it was there. Pretty convenient. So I put a zip tie through it, through the chain. I don't need it to be super strong or anything. I don't think this will break. And then I'm just gonna run the chain right here to the bottom of the mud flap, put a bolt and nut through it, and we'll be all done. All right, I think I'm officially done. Look at that. That chain pulls that mud flap way back. There's zero chance of my tire hitting the mud flap now. Perfect. The only thing left to do here is I am gonna put 2 more rivets, one here and one here. I just ran out of rivets, so I'll do that at a later time. But I think I'm all done for now. I'll show you the driver's side as well. Check it out. All right, guys, that wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helps you out. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. Maybe subscribe, maybe hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next video.